So this is where the fun actually starts, because in this video, you'll discover how to get perfect color and exposure in your photos. Just watch this video, apply the techniques that you're about to discover, and your photos literally will never look the same again. The techniques I'm about to share with you in this video are so powerful that if you use them, you can literally improve any photo that you've ever taken with your iPhone or with any other camera. They're that good. So by the end of this video, we'll have taken this original unedited photo and we'll have transformed it into this beautiful masterpiece with vibrant colors and perfect exposure. And in order to accomplish that, we'll be using an app called Snapseed, which is a free app that you can use both on your iPhone and iPad. So before you watch any further, please make sure you have the Snapseed app downloaded on your iPhone, and also make sure you download the original unedited photo. And the best way to watch these lessons is to not just watch the videos, but to actually do the edits at the same time. So to do that, you want to watch the course on one device, such as your computer, and then do the actual edits on your iPhone, just as I'm doing them. If you do it that way, you'll learn the most. But now, let's get started, and I'll show you how you can greatly improve any photo using the Tune Image module of Snapseed. So here's what the Snapseed app will look like when you first open it. And nothing really happens until you actually open a photo. And to open a photo, you can just tap anywhere, or you can use the open button at the top left-hand corner. So if we tap on open, you'll get all these different ways to open an image. But the one we'll be using the most is open from device. So I'll tap my finger there. And now you'll see all the different things you have in your photo library, the different folders, and so on. And if you just download the sample photo we're going to work with, then that photo should be in the All Photos folder at the very bottom. So here's the image I want to open, and now you can see that it's open in Snapseed. Now the interesting thing about Snapseed app is that you can use it both vertically, as I'm doing it right now, or you can rotate the screen, and you can also use this app horizontally. So it's a matter of preference, and for some photos, you might prefer to hold your iPhone horizontally, and for others, you might prefer to do it vertically. But for most videos, we'll be using the horizontal aspect ratio simply because it looks nicer on video. And now we can start editing. So on the right-hand side, you'll see that there are a lot of predefined edits. So essentially, Snapseed has already done a whole bunch of different edits to the image, and you can scroll through these. But most of the times, they will not fit your particular photo. So I'm not a big fan of this feature. So I'm going to tap on X at the top right, and I'm not going to use these predefined edits at all. Instead, all the editing magic of Snapseed happens on the right-hand side of the screen, where you'll see this pencil icon. So if you tap there, all these different editing options come up, and you can scroll through them, and this is where you access all the power of Snapseed. Now the one feature, or the one module of Snapseed that you'll be using the most is called Tune Image, and it's the first one. And this is really where most of the editing will take place, and this is also what you're going to learn about in this video. So I'm going to go ahead and tap on Tune Image, and you'll see that the Tune Image module comes up. Now at the bottom of the screen, you have several different buttons, and the first button I'd like to show you is this button here that looks like a magic wand, and if you tap there, Snapseed does an automatic adjustment where it just tries to guess what type of edit would work best for this photo. So I tapped this button, and Snapseed already edited the photo for me. And on the top right-hand corner of the screen, there's an icon that I can press to do a before and after. And as I'm holding down my finger, you'll see the before state of the image, and as I release my finger, you can see the after. Now, the automatic function hardly did anything here, and most of the time I will not use it because I prefer to edit my photos manually. So if I'm not interested in keeping the changes I made in Tune Image, all I have to do is tap the X checkmark at the bottom left-hand corner right here. And if I tap X, I'm out of Tune Image, and I'm back where we started, and I haven't made any changes to the photo yet. So let's open Tune Image again, and this time we'll actually do the edits ourselves. Now, in order to access the full editing power of Snapseed, pretty much all the modules have different sliders, and the way you access these sliders is by swiping your finger vertically across the screen. And as you do that, all these different effects come up. And you can select any one of these, like brightness. And then if you swipe your finger horizontally, like so, you can increase brightness or decrease brightness. And this is how pretty much all the modules of Snapseed work. So you swipe vertically to find the right effect, you swipe horizontally to change the value of that particular effect. And now let's go through all of these effects one by one, and I'll explain what each of them does as we're editing this photo. So the first effect you'll find at the top is called brightness. And brightness essentially is how dark or how bright your image is going to be. So if brightness goes down, the image becomes really dark. If brightness goes up, the image becomes really bright. And you'll see at top left that we can also see the value of brightness. So now it's +5, but we can go all the way up to +100 or all the way down to -100. And these are the values of the individual sliders. So for this specific photo, I think that the brightness is fine the way it is. So I'm going to leave it at 0 for now. I don't think this photo is too dark or too bright, so I don't see a point of changing brightness at this point. So let's move on and let's switch to the second effect, and that is called contrast. So contrast essentially determines how different the brightest parts of your image are from the darkest parts of your image. So let me increase contrast and you'll see what I mean. Now, as I'm increasing contrast, you'll see that the image is essentially reduced to a lot of white pixels and a lot of black pixels. And that's not really pretty, but that's what contrast does. Or if we go down, you'll see that the image becomes less contrasted and the difference between the brightest and the darkest pixels becomes less and less pronounced. So that's not good either, but that's what happens when we decrease contrast. So if you increase it, it becomes more contrasted. There's a lot of blacks, a lot of whites, not much in the middle. If you decrease it, the opposite happens. Now, for this specific image, I'm also going to keep contrast at 0, at least for now. And the reason for that is that you can get even more control over the contrast of your photo if you actually adjust the highlights and shadows of the photo separately. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. For now, I'll leave contrast at 0, and I'll move on to the next adjustment, which is called saturation. So saturation essentially determines how strong the colors of your photo are. So if you increase saturation, you'll see that the colors really become more vibrant and they really start to stand out more. So all the colors essentially become stronger. Or if you decrease saturation, the opposite happens, and if you go all the way down to -100, you end up with a black and white photo. So this is also the easiest way to convert any photo to black and white. Now, this is a sunset photo, and if there's one thing that really makes it special, it is the colors. You can see a lot of orange tones, a lot of blues, the beautiful reflection, and what makes this photo work are the colors, and because of that, I want to actually go ahead and increase saturation here. And the more we increase it, the stronger these colors get. Now, a typical beginner mistake would be to go all in on saturation, to do 100 or 80 or any other crazy high value like that. And it can be tempting to do this, but it is a bad idea, generally speaking, to increase saturation or any of these effects too much. And the biggest beginner mistake I see all the time is over-editing photos. Now, there are different editing styles and different approaches to editing, but the one approach I'd like you to practice, at least initially, is to do the kind of edits that really improve the image, but that you cannot necessarily see. In other words, when someone looks at your photo, I don't want that person to first notice the edit. I want them to first notice the photo, and then if they start thinking about it, they might realize that the photo has been edited, but you don't want the edit to stand out more than the photo itself. And because of that, I'm not going to increase saturation too much, and I'll stick to a relatively modest value of +40. It's still a big improvement compared to 0, so if I tap on the before and after icon at the top right, and if I hold my finger there, you'll see the before version of the photo, and as I release my finger, you can see the after. And it's clearly an improvement, but at this point, it's not too much, and the edit does not look unnatural, and that's the goal here. But now, let's move on to the next effect, and that is called Ambiance. So Ambiance is kind of interesting because it modifies both the exposure and the color at the same time. So let me show you what it does. If you increase Ambiance, two things will happen. One is that the natural contrast of the image goes down, so there will be less blacks and less whites in the image. So the contrast is decreased as you increase Ambiance, but at the same time, Ambiance also increases the saturation of the colors that are sort of in the middle of the photo. So the midtones, which are neither the darkest parts of the image nor the brightest parts of the image increase in saturation as you increase ambience. And if you go in the negative direction, the opposite will happen. So if you go all the way down to minus 100, the image becomes more contrasted and the saturation also goes down. Now, you typically don't decrease ambience most of the time, but it can be very tempting to increase it because the image appears to get better as you do it. And a typical beginner mistake, again, would be to increase ambience too much. So we're now at plus 100, and it might seem like a good idea. But two things happen when you increase it so much. Number one, the colors get unnatural, which you can clearly see now. And number two, if we really zoom in using two fingers as I'm doing now, you'll see a whole bunch of weird quality issues start to appear in the photo. For example, if we look at this dark blue cloud, and if we look at it really closely, you'll see that there's a lot of green and a lot of purple in the dark blue cloud, and that's not good. And also the overall level of grain in the image goes up. So in general, increasing ambience a lot is an easy way to reduce the quality of your photo. So don't increase ambience too much. I'll zoom out now, and I'll try to find a modest value of ambience. I want to increase it just a little bit, but I don't want to overdo this. And from my experience, small values, such as plus 15 to plus 30, tend to work best. But for now, I'll just stick to plus 15 because I really don't want to overdo ambience and get any of the quality loss associated with it. And now let's continue, and the next effect is called highlights. And highlights is really interesting. And what it does is essentially it affects the brightest parts of the image only. So with the highlights slider, if you go all the way up, the brightest parts of the image become even brighter, and you can now see that all the bright parts of the sky are almost white. Or if you go down, the opposite will happen, and the brightest parts of the image actually become darker. Now, this can be a very good way to affect your photo. And for this photo, I want to slightly increase highlights. It might seem a bit counterintuitive, like why would you want to increase them, especially considering that the image almost starts to look better as you go down. But the reason I want to increase them is because of contrast. And generally speaking, from my experience, I can tell you that images that are higher in contrast tend to look better to the human eye. Now, you don't want to overdo this, but most of the time you can improve a photo by adding just a little bit more extra contrast. And the way I like to add extra contrast is by essentially increasing highlights and then decreasing shadows a little bit. So if I go too high on the highlights, you'll see that all the oranges disappear from the sky. So there were a lot of orange tones, and now they're all gone, and that's not good, and because these oranges really make this photo more beautiful. But if I increase highlights just a little bit to plus 15, the oranges don't really disappear, but the image becomes just a little bit more contrasted, which is what I want. And now, let's go to shadows. And shadows is just like highlights, except it only affects the darkest parts of your image, or the shadows. So with shadows, you can increase it, and increasing shadows essentially makes the shadows brighter. So look closely at the bottom of the image where it's darker, or look at the dark clouds, and as we increase shadows, you'll see that the dark parts of the image actually become brighter. Or if we go in the other direction, and if we decrease shadows, the shadows become even darker until eventually they're completely black. Now, for all of these effects, the key is to use them in moderation. And my experience shows that most images can be improved by slightly decreasing shadows, but you don't want to overdo this. And for this photo, I've played around with it before, and I found that a value of -5 is what I was looking for. It's a tiny change, but it's just enough to add this photo a little bit extra punchiness so that the natural contrast is bigger. And now, we're almost done, but the last effect I want you to look at is called warmth. So warmth is similar to white balance, if you're familiar with that idea, but essentially warmth determines how warm your image feels to the viewer. And if you go to the left, the image becomes bluer, and blue means cold in photography. So if you go to the left, you're getting a colder image, or if you go to the right, you're getting this golden glow, and the more to the right you go, the more yellow the image essentially becomes. So for sunsets, generally speaking, you want to increase warmth because sunsets are very warm naturally, but the trick, once again, is to not overdo this. It can be tempting to go up to plus 40, and it does look kind of nice, But the reason I don't want to go that high is because I still want the blue sky and the blue clouds to be blue, but I want this blue to be complemented by even stronger warm tones. And as I was playing around with this, I found that a value of plus 15 works really nice. Because now what happens is that the warm parts of the image are even warmer, but the blue still looks relatively blue, which is the natural way it should look. And now I can essentially make this image warmer. It looks nicer, but the blue is still blue, and I want the blue to look natural. Now, please understand that each photo is different, and editing your photos in Tune Image is essentially a circular process. You change one value, then you go to the next one, then the next one, and when you're done, you go back and you change some of the early values again. And you keep doing this until you get the look that you're happy about. Now, I've edited this photo before, so I'm not going to go back. I already know that I really like this combination of values, and that's because I played around with this photo for a few minutes. So when you're doing these edits yourself, the way you want to do this is that you just go through all of them once to find a good combination that you're happy about, and then you go through all the edits again and you adjust them some more until you get to a combination that you really like. So it's a circular process. It's a bit of trial and error, but if you try it enough times, you'll develop a good intuition about what works really good for each photo. And in case you're still not fully confident about this, don't worry, because we'll be returning to Tune Image many times throughout this course. But now, let's see what we've been able to accomplish. So I'm going to tap my finger on the before and after switch at the top right. So, and as I'm holding down my finger, you can see the before, which is nice, but the colors aren't quite there. And as I release my finger, you can see the after version, and the colors look so much better. Now, one final thing I'd like you to do before applying these effects is to just really zoom in, and zoom in a lot, don't just zoom in a little bit, and see what you've done to the quality of the image. So zoom in, and then do a before and after again, and see how much the quality of your image has been affected by your edits. As a general rule, the more you edit your photos, the worse the quality will become, and you'll start seeing unnatural colors, grain, and potentially other problems. Now, for this photo, I don't think we've really introduced any problems at all. I'm really happy with this edit, but get in the habit of zooming in to check the quality before you finalize your edits. Now, I'm happy with this, so I'm not going to change anything else, and all I have to do now is tap the OK check mark at bottom right-hand corner, and once I tap my finger there, everything we did in Tune Image is applied, and you can see now in the home screen we have a photo that's already been edited. Now, if we wanted to keep editing, we would tap the pencil icon again, and we can now select any of the other effects and we can keep going. Or if we feel like we're done, then you tap on the bottom right-hand corner here, and you have these different options for saving your photos. So let me quickly explain how these options are different. So the first option is to save, and if you tap that, Snapseed will try to modify your photo, and you'll get this prompt asking if you actually want to modify the image. Now, I don't like doing this. The benefit of doing it is that you will not have multiple versions of the same photo on your iPhone, so it's actually going to be cleaner. But as a photo artist, I like to always keep a clean version of the original photo, and because of that, I don't typically modify the photos. I don't allow this, I don't use this option, and I'll save both the original and a separate edited photo. Now, just in case you do modify your photo, don't worry, because all the edits you do in Snapseed can be reversed. So it's non-destructive editing, which essentially means that if you're tired of the edit, you can just remove it altogether and return to the original. But still, I don't like overwriting the originals, so I always use the second option, which is save a copy. When you use this option, Snapseed creates a new version of the same photo with all the edits applied, and you can still remove the edits if you choose to do so later. Now, the third option for saving is called Export, and if you use this option, then Snapseed will again create a new version of the same photo, but you will not be able to cancel the edits. So there's really no need to use the Export, and save a copy is the option I recommend you use all the time.